Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 241 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Lieberman, and today I'm excited to share with you a tool that you can leverage to make running your business more impactful, have more momentum, and lighter emotionally. We're talking about how to stop decision debt and why let me think about it costs you time, money, momentum, confidence. Super excited about this. I did something a few weeks ago that was so impactful in my business. I had to share it with you, and I'll tell you what it is at the end of this episode. But I will say it was the inspiration of this episode, which was kind of a backlog, let's say, of decisions I needed to make. And through that journey, and again, I'll tell you how I handled these decisions in a little bit. But before that, I wanted to really explore this idea of decision debt and walk you through why it is much more dangerous than we might imagine in our business, much more of an impact, a negative impact in our business than we might imagine. And then share this tool with you toward the end so you can leverage it as well. But first, I want to just talk about what is decision debt. So we're going to talk today about what is decision debt, why we default to this idea of quote unquote, let me think about it, 4 or 5 reasons why this happens, because sometimes we think this is a good thing. And I want to share with you not only why we do this, but also the costs. What are the impacts of accumulating decision debt? I'll walk you through 5 costs of having that decision debt and 2 specific examples that will probably resonate with you. They do with most, I think, with most of us as independent consultants. And then I will wrap up the episode with those practical solutions to reduce your decision debt or even eliminate it. I'll share with you what I did to get rid of mine, which was incredibly simple, but incredibly freeing. So I can't wait to share that with you. And then we'll wrap up with a very specific way to put this episode into action. I'm excited to share this quick exercise with you. So be sure to listen to the end for that as well. All right. So that's our agenda for today in episode 241. Before we dive into the first part of the agenda, I want to share with you the companion resources for today's episode. And those are the combination of my quarterly business planner and the Business Brain Journal. If you haven't checked them out yet, they are on Amazon, but also I just released the website for them, which is really exciting. You can go to GrowthAtlas Solutions and check out that website. It walks you through all 3 products and gives you links to find them on Amazon, which just makes it a lot easier to find them. And if you've already purchased them and are using them, I would love your feedback on Amazon. It's a quick process to go add your feedback. If you have time to include a quick video of how you're using it, you don't have to be on camera. That's also impactful. But even if it's just a text-based feedback, that would be incredibly valuable because it helps other people to find it. Ultimately, my goal is to get to 100 reviews. I think I'm at maybe, 10 or 12 right now. So I've got a ways to go. Would definitely appreciate that if you've been using them. If you haven't, go check them out because these are a great asset to leverage in this decision-making process that we're going to walk through today. Okay, so with that, let's talk about what is decision debt. Again, this seems harmless so often. I know for me, I often think this is very harmless. Even simple decisions, not even business decisions. If you think about the decisions that you have in your life that you haven't yet made, they pile up. So this decision debt is the accumulation of all of the unmade decisions that are sitting in your mental inbox. They may not be written down. Most of the time we don't write down, I need to make this decision about X, right? We just have it kind of in this mental inbox. This is what we'll call for today's episode decision debt. It's every time you say to yourself or even out loud, I'll think about it. It keeps a mental door open, a mental cycle open, and it drains your energy. I'll give you some examples. delaying choosing a new software tool. Maybe you're trying to figure out what CRM to use and you're just kind of going back and forth, back and forth. Maybe you're rethinking your pricing and whether or not to increase it. Maybe you're not sure whether to say yes to a red flag potential client and you're kind of hemming and hawing. Or maybe you've got an existing client that's red flag and you are thinking of not working with them anymore, but it's not a decision that you've yet made. Sometimes we think we make decisions, but we're really not committed to them. We say, oh, I'm going to do X, but you don't really commit to it. That's another form of decision debt where you're kind of waving your hand at it. Yes, I'm going to do this thing, but you're not clear and specific about when you're going to do that thing or why you're going to do that thing. So it's really not a decision, even though it seems like it's a decision. Or maybe you're unsure whether or not you're going to hire an assistant or a bookkeeper or any subcontractors. You've got these open loops in your brain. This is what we're talking about today, the decision debt. Let's talk about the root causes of this decision debt. Some of them may seem very obvious, some may not. Let's just really call them out so we can understand, because some of them sound very logical or practical or a smart way of going about things. But the root causes boil down to these 4 areas. Number 1, you have a fear of making the wrong choice. I think this is so common for us as independent consultants. We want to be smart. We want to make smart decisions. We want to make informed decisions. And then we use that against ourselves really by leaning on this fear of making the wrong choice. We justify our indecision by saying we're making a smart decision, but really it boils down to the fear of making the wrong choice. So we end up, because of this fear, we delay or avoid decisions because they feel risky, not realizing that indecision has its own cost, right? Sometimes we think about, well, if I make the wrong decision here, it's going to have these horrible impacts. So we don't make a decision because of that fear, but we don't look at the other side of the coin, which is indecision has its own costs also. We'll talk about what those costs are here in a moment. The other root cause of this decision debt is the belief that more time is beneficial. The belief that more time leads to better clarity, for example. The belief that more time leads to a better decision. But the truth is that waiting rarely creates clarity. Waiting rarely creates clarity. The reason why is because as we quote unquote wait and marinate, I hear this a lot, I'm going to marinate on that. We don't actually have a specific process that we're using or a set of decision criteria that we're using. We're just letting this like unchecked thought process run in our brain without any guidelines. Of course, it's going to then result in draining your mental energy and increasing your cognitive load. So this idea that more time is better when you're making a decision, or that a decision takes time to make, is one of the root causes of this decision debt. It is not a fact, even though most of us have been taught this in some form or fashion. You should really think about this. You should really give it some time, let it set in. At the end of the day, that might sound really smart, but it's creating this cognitive load and this energy drain for you. I'll tell you in a little bit what we can replace this with, but for right now, let's talk about these root causes. The next one is that you may just have created a habit for yourself of overthinking instead of deciding. This is also a very common for independent consultants. We can have a habit of overthinking, of overanalyzing, but these unmade decisions are occupying your mental bandwidth until they're resolved. Your brain is looping back over and over again to close up the gap. This habit of overthinking is costing you so much. But I want to emphasize that the root cause here is that it's just a habit. Just like anything, you get into a habit of eating, cookies at night. You can break the habit. It's not fun or easy sometimes, but you can break the habit. This is a habit that you might have gotten yourself into. And listen, it may be an overhang of corporate America, right? Or corporate wherever you are in the world, where a lot of times making decisions puts us in more risk than leaving the status quo. But for you now as a business owner, that's not true. And I'm not saying every decision should be a yes. Of course, they shouldn't. Some should be an absolute no. But getting yourself to the place where you're getting super clear about what are the decisions that need to be made and making them and having a process to make them is what we're talking about here today. So you may just be in a habit that can be broken. And then finally, another root cause of this decision debt is the human desire to avoid short term discomfort. Your brain is designed to have the maximum amount of pleasure in the short term and the least amount of pain in the short term. It's discomfort. There's a lot of discomfort amount, when we're making decisions, right? Because we might be saying no to something that we assume or think will let someone else down. That doesn't feel good. Or we think that it's painful because we're going to lose a potential client or we won't have another one. Or it seems like it's painful because we're saying yes to something that's going to really stretch us out of our comfort zone. Those are the reasons why we create this decision debt for ourselves. We create this problem for ourselves. It's that fear of making the wrong choice. It's the belief that more time creates a better decision. It's the habit of overthinking instead of deciding, and the desire to avoid short term discomfort because of the way our brains work. So, those are some of the reasons, the main reasons why we have and naturally create this decision debt if we don't work on it proactively. Now, let's talk about why this matters. What are the costs of the decision debt? Because sometimes we think, well, it's not that big of a deal, right? It's not that big of a deal. I'll get to the decision when I get to it. Not a problem. But there are real costs to this decision debt. Some are mental, some are tangible. The first tangible one is a lost opportunities, right? When you're stuck in I'll think about it, the time is moving on. Other things are moving on. So when you're lost in I'll think about it, the status quo is what's prevailing, and you're likely losing opportunities, whether it's increasing your pricing or going out after advisory type clients or retainer type clients instead of hourly type clients. Whatever it looks like for you, these are lost opportunities when you're stuck in this idea of I'll think about it or more time will lend to a better decision. Another cost of your decision debt is slower execution. When you have all of these mental loops in your mind, and listen, they're not just work mental loops. I know for me, I'll give you a little preview of what inspired this episode, but I was sitting down and I just decided to write out what are all the open questions that I have. A lot of them were about personal things like, are we going to go to this particular swim meet? Are we going to travel to this particular water polo thing? I mean, when you start writing all of these down, it's eye opening as to how many things that don't seem like a decision are actually open decisions, are part of this decision debt in your life. So for you, think about this. So what are all the open questions that you've got going on in your mind? Even if they don't seem obvious. I mean, for the most part, we go to every single swim meet. Doesn't feel like a decision, but it is actually a decision. And sitting down and thinking through that actually will, not only save those mental cycles from being open, but also prevents this idea of you just keep kicking the can down the road on a decision until you're kind of stuck with it. We'll talk about that as an example here in a second. Okay, so we've got lost opportunities, we've got slower execution because we've got all of these open cycles going in our minds. It's hard for work to flow. And also, this can lead to second guessing, right? So both of those types of things will slow down execution, of course. Then we've got the mental fatigue of this. Your brain has all these background questions going on. All of these open decisions are basically open loops running in your brain subconsciously. And of course, that's going to drain your creativity. It's going to drain your energy. It's going to drain your stamina. These are things you need most as a business owner. The decision debt can also erode your confidence because this indecision is quietly telling your brain, like, I can't trust myself. I can't trust myself to make a decision and stick to it. So over time, that self doubt is becoming a habit for yourself and eroding your confidence as a result. For sure, we don't need something going on in your business that's self inflicted, that's eroding your confidence. There's plenty of other things happening that can erode our confidence. We don't need this one that's self inflicted to be doing so, right? By the way, most things that are self-inflicted that are eroding our confidence, but this is one of them that can is easily tackleable, if that's a word. And I'll share with you how to do that here in a minute. And then we have a hidden financial costs, right? Each delayed decision has an opportunity cost. It goes back to that idea I was just saying, we think that delaying a decision is one that ends up, protecting us, that the decision is either a yes or a no. But at the end of the day, there's an opportunity cost because when we don't make a decision, then we're delaying that ability, for example, to raise our prices. We're delaying that ability to figure out how to transform what we do into higher value and therefore higher compensation for what we do. The indecision has a cost. At the end of the day, those are the 5 real costs of your decision debt: lost opportunities, slower execution, mental fatigue, eroded confidence, financial costs. Decision debt isn't just slowing you down, it's shrinking your business's potential return. The longer you delay in making decision over decision over decision, it's costing you money, it's costing you momentum, it's costing you mental energy, and quite frankly, it's costing you the ability to think of yourself in a different way. When you think of yourself as a $1 million business owner, imagine the type of decisions, the powerfulness of the decisions, the decisiveness of the decisions that a $1 million business owner is making compared to where you might be right now. Likely it's night and day. These are real costs. This is not something that's a nice to address or an interesting topic for the podcast for the week. These are real costs to you as a business owner. And again, you may have just been wired, whether it's a habit or the way that it worked better in corporate. This is different now as you're running a business. So you want to be addressing this. I'll give you 2 examples to bring this to life, and then we'll talk about mechanisms to overcome this decision debt and process this decision debt. And they're not as painful as you might imagine. They're actually kind of fun. I'll finish out the story that I gave you, started a minute ago, about kind of what highlighted this for me and was the inspiration for this episode. So let's talk about 2 examples here. One I've touched on already, which is delaying a price increase. You may be at the place right now where you're considering a price increase, whether it's because you're wrapping up an engagement and you're ready to start another engagement, or because the new year is almost upon us and you're thinking about, am I going to increase my fees? And you've been meaning to increase the way you price, and you keep kicking the can down the road for whatever reason, right? Oh, this existing client, I'm going to extend with them. It makes sense to keep them at the current rates. Like, you can justify your status quo all day long. That doesn't mean that you're making a decision. Because while you wait to make a decision, one way or the other, yes, I'm going to increase my rates. This is how much. This is when I'm going to do it. That is what a decision sounds like. Or no, I have decided I am not going to increase my rates and I'm going to revisit it at the end of Q1. That is what a decision sounds like. While you wait on making a decision, you're still working at the old rate. So you're leaving money on the table. You're attracting clients who expect lower pricing, even if it's subconsciously. So you're reinforcing what you're pricing out at right now. You start losing confidence in your value, making it even harder eventually to increase your rates. Your brain is amassing evidence that solidifies the status quo. And this cost becomes cumulative, right? Because not only are you leaving money on the table, but you're continuously reinforcing the status quo in your brain. And it becomes harder time after time to increase your rates. Let's talk about the second example: delaying a red flag, what I'll call a red flag prospect. So let's say this happens so often, you're talking to a potential client, you start seeing red flag signs, whatever those are, right? Maybe they're constantly changing their mind. You already know they're not going to pay, your rack fees. whatever it is. They're just not nice people to work with. There are so many red flags that we could be seeing during our sales process. But you start talking yourself out, you just keep going, right? You just keep going. Your pipeline feels light and you just keep going. You have another call with them, you reply to another email, you just keep kind of convincing yourself that it could be okay. This is not a decision. This is you just delaying or deferring a decision. Or you put yourself into a corner. Now it becomes too late to walk away because you've gone so far down the path. And so you end up taking them on anyway as a client because you didn't make a decision. You didn't say to yourself, listen, let me give myself a gate here. I've uncovered all of these things. Let me give myself a gate. Am I going to offer consulting to this client or not? You didn't do that. You just kind of kept kicking the can down the road, kept letting the process run itself. And eventually you feel boxed into a corner where you end up taking on the client. And then, of course, the project drains you and it consumes your best time and your energy, and it crowds out other opportunities with clients who could actually be a good fit for you financially and in a way that's fulfilling. So, this cost becomes strategic for you in your business and emotional for you. You traded the short term relief to say, okay, I landed a client, I've got revenue flowing in for the long term growth. And you also end up losing confidence and capacity for the right clients, right? There's a cost to these things. But this is another example of decision debt where it might not feel like there's a decision there, but there is. You're just not putting it into your process or recognizing that you've truly made a decision and not one that benefits you. So those are a couple of examples, one that's more explicit and one that's more tricky to notice as you're looking at your own decision debt in your business and figuring out what that is. Hopefully, those give you some inspiration. So now let's talk about the practical solutions to decision debt. The first is recognizing what your decisions are. This is where my example comes into play. So the other day I was planning. That's how this is a companion resource. I was in my quarterly business planner. I was writing, really planning out the week. And I don't know why it hit me, but I realized, oh, I need to make some decisions here. And, of course, we're all making decisions all the time, but it just hit me in a slightly different way. I think it's just because now I've got this accumulation of some changes in my business that I'm making, like the launch of the lead gen sprint offer. So I'm offering some new things in my business. Now I've got these physical products. Plus my kids are now I've got 3 kids. Now they were in one sport, competitive swimming. Now they're also in water polo. So we've kind of got all these permutations going. So it just dawned on me, and I felt inspired to write down a list of the open decisions that needed to be made. And this time, instead of just capturing the big decisions like, what am I going to price this thing at? Or am I going to offer this thing or not? Like those big decisions that seem very obvious. I wrote those down, but I also started writing down things that that I typically in the past had just been kind of letting themselves make their own decisions, right? Like, are we going to go to this swim meet as an example? I was running off of the thought process, like, oh, we go to every swim meet. So we'll just say yes to all of these by default without really thinking it through. But I wrote all of those down, all the personal ones, all the business ones. And then I just started going in one by one, yes or no. Or do I need more information? 80% of them, I just made a decision, whether it was yes or no, or here's the price of this thing, or here's the date of this thing, like, whatever it was. Or yes, I'm going to offer this. When am I going to offer it? It was pretty simple and straightforward. I wrote it down and I made it very clear to myself, I'm committing to these decisions. Because that's the other component to this. You can make decisions all day long, but if you don't commit to the decision, then it's really useless, right? So I went through and just kind of cleared off 80% of them and made it clear that I was committing to those decisions that I had made. And then the other 20% that were left, I wrote down, okay, what else do I need to know in order to make this decision? And by when am I going to make the decision? So I put it on my to-do list for the following week, right? Let me figure out these answers. And by next Sunday, when I go back through this process again, my weekly planning process, I will make these decisions. So I share that example with you to highlight a few things. The first is the mechanism that you can leverage to reduce this decision debt. The second is that the decision is just half of the equation. It's also the commitment to the decision that is really where the rubber hits the road. Otherwise, it just goes back into the decision debt pile, right? You're like, I need to redecide this. We don't want that. So that's a really important component to this, of that marriage of making a decision and committing to the decision. Or if you don't have enough data, and being honest with yourself, is this really that I don't have enough data? Or is my brain getting really smart at talking myself out of making decisions? You've got to get really clear about that. But if you, for some of those decisions that truly do fit into the bucket of I need more data, then making a clear plan about how you're going to get that data, putting it on your task list, and setting a deadline to make the decision based on, having that information. That's the mechanism. And I can't but tell you how freeing it was for me to go through that process. Now it's part of my weekly planning process, my monthly planning process. I'll put it into my quarterly and yearly processes as well. But incredibly freeing and surprisingly freeing on some of these seemingly, simple decisions, like the personal ones I was sharing with you. Very freeing because of those reasons why we were talking about earlier, of why this is such a costly situation to have this decision debt. So, to run you through back one more time, and then I'll give you the exercise that I want to share with you to end this episode. The practical solution to solving this decision debt is having a decision log that you can leverage to capture and batch your decision making. For me, I put it in the back of my quarterly business planner as kind of a running list. This is my decision debt. And for each one of them, I go through it on a weekly basis to reduce the debt. The other thing I love to do, another way to do this is, because I use both digital and paper, putting it in my task management list as its own project. So in my task management app, I have a project in there that says decisions. I put them all in there. And then that's one of the sources that I use in addition to that list in the back of my planner on my weekly decisioning process. You could also use the notes app in your phone, but capture a decision log somewhere so that you can then put it into your weekly process to make decisions, and make sure that you're distinguishing between, what does a decision require? Does it need more data? Like we just talked about that. And then you're scheduling a time to gather it. Does it need more courage? Make that decision now. Or is there some form of delegation that it requires? Maybe you hand it over to your spouse, for example. At the end of the day, we want to clear off this decision debt. The other tool that I'll share with you is in the moment. So, for example, if you're talking with someone and you're trying to make a decision, let's say that you're going to make a decision about engaging a bookkeeper and you're interviewing 3 bookkeepers, you would say to that bookkeeper, listen, I've got 3 interviews and I will make a decision by Friday at noon and I'll get back to you. Of course, that benefits the bookkeeper that you're talking with because they know what your process is. But even more powerfully, it benefits you because now you have a process by which you're going to make your decision and a container or boundary around that decision for yourself to reduce that mental load. So these are the practical solutions to help you reduce this decision debt and keep it under control. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to share with you a tool or a challenge to put this episode into action. I'll call it the decision debt exercise. So this weekend, or whenever you're listening to this episode, list 10 things you've been thinking about, or that you need to make a decision about, or that you have said to yourself, I need to marinate on this. List 10 of them, at least. You might come out to more, but list 10 of them. Even if they're personal and professional, your business, whatever it is, list 10 of them. And then circle the 3 that feel the heaviest. And then commit to deciding on one of those by the end of the week. This will be just the smallest step to helping you start to tackle that decision debt and starting to put in place that routine that I just gave you. Because at the end of the day, you don't need more time to think. It's critical to decide and act and adjust. The more you can decide, the more you can take action, and the more you can get feedback, gives you that loop for you for continuous improvement. And every time you close one of these decision loops, you're reclaiming that energy so that you can create more in your business that is in line with the direction and the vision that you want to go in. This is how you move from thinking like an employee or thinking like a consultant to operating like a business owner. I encourage you to put this week's episode into action, and I will see you again next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.